Good morning, curious investors. It's great to see you again. It's great to be back with you, and I bet you're curious about this hat. We'll get into that here in a bit, but as we jump into our conversation today, I just want you to know life is risky. It is risky no matter what you choose to do, and you cannot avoid risk. And so we got to talk about the safety disclaimers that go along with this particular podcast. Make sure I'm sharing this with you because definitely want you to be aware of what's going on here. We are at risk anytime we do investments. The risks today are that if you wish to remain unidentified from recording, please remove your name and face from the screen views. This broadcast is strictly our opinions. Stock investing includes risk, including fluctuations in the prices and the potential loss of principal. Dividends aren't guaranteed. Following information is not a recommendation in relation to any named securities. Any references to specific securities are for illustrative purpose only. Content provided at this event is for general information, not intended to provide specific advice. Don't buy anything that's mentioned on here. Don't believe anything that's mentioned on here. Have a one-on-one conversation with your professionals before you make any acts or decisions. Any tax references or illustrations, seek advice from tax professionals before acting on these ideas. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Investment advice is offered through Gimbal Financial, a registered investment advisor, and completely 100% separate from LPL Financial. All right, that covers those disclaimers. Now, let's get back to just talking about the risk of life. I was thinking that everything you do is risky. This is hand sanitizer with the beautiful Gimbal Financial logo on it, and it includes risk. I have to get my readers on to even tell you the risk here, but if I pop these on, the print is so small on the back of this thing, an old guy like me needs readers, and it says, warning, for external use only, hands, flammable. All right, if you're going to use this as a fire starter, then you know that it does that now, evidently. And you know that this is not a glass of water. Don't drink this stuff because it won't have the same outcome and benefit as doing this. Every single thing you do has some sort of risk associated with it. The biggest risk is the opportunity cost. If you try to live life too safely, you'll miss out on what life really is. It's an adventure. And so there's just risk out there, and our culture tries to make it seem as though we don't have risk, but we do in fact have risk with everything we do. So how are we going to deal with that? Well, we're going to make decisions. We're going to think through our decisions and be intelligent in our kind of sorting through whether something makes sense for our unique personality. What I do may not be the right decision for you. What you do may not be the right one for me, but individually, we have that freedom to choose what risk we're willing to accept. And anything we talk about on investments here is going to have inherent risk that you need to think through and make sure that makes sense for you. Otherwise, you're going to find out in a disappointed manner that you made a bad decision. All right? And we are not going to help you with those on a broadcast like this. This is something you need to talk to a specific investment advisor to help you through. But I wore this hat because I decided to take a risk a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4, I don't remember when it was, but I decided to go see the Northern Lights in Alaska in February. How do you guys say that? February or February? I say February. It doesn't feel right coming off my tongue, but February doesn't look right according to how it's spelled. So that's one of those risks I'm going to just endure in life. But going to Alaska is not something you can do virtually. You can do it. You can go online and watch it. It's 2-dimensional, and it's not the same as going to Alaska. I've been there a couple times, and those things are risky. If you go to Alaska, it's a risky proposition. There's animals there. There's some wild things that go on there that could be dangerous to your life. You could lose your life as a tourist going to Alaska. So why would you go? Well, I went in the winter, which is particularly risky because I wanted to see the Northern Lights. Have you ever seen the Northern Lights? You might have seen them in Michigan or something like that. I wanted to go far enough north where I could see them and see the beauty and the majesty of those. And so we went at the end of February and had the risk that we might not see them if it was a cloudy day or if it's a bright sky. The Northern Lights might be difficult to see, but we went and took that risk. And the night that we went to see the Northern Lights, it was almost 30 below zero at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we got to see them, which was really cool. And I had this bad boy on to keep me warm. And speaking of that, it's a little too warm for me right now, so you get to see this hairdo. But then the first time I went to Alaska, we had a risk that you couldn't see in two-dimensional things like watching on your computer screen. We decided that we would go fishing near a glacier in a cove that you had to go from a pontoon plane to a john boat to a cove that came to a point like this. And in that cove, you had the john boats lined up for people that were trying to catch some salmon. And you had to wait probably 30 minutes, give the person in front of you 30 minutes for all their fishing people to catch whatever they want. Then if they didn't catch their limit, they had to go to the back of the line. So we sat there patiently watching the most amazing thing that you could ever see. We saw eagles flying overhead. We saw all kinds of wildlife. The salmon, they go out to sea and then they come back to the place where they were born to die. And so these salmon were finishing life, and you can't get out of life risk-free. You are going to get out of life the same way that the salmon get out. You're going to finish it one way or another. And so that's why risk is just risk. It isn't, you can't avoid it. There's no way out of this thing. But the salmon are coming back to this cove to finish their life. And so the fishermen and fisherwomen know that, and that's where they go fishing because they can catch nice sized salmon there. And so we waited our turn, and we finally got to the front of our line, and we had the cove for 30 minutes. The clock was running. It's an honor system. You don't go 31, you go 30. And as we were fishing, a mother grizzly bear and her 2 cubs jumped into the water because they decided it was time to go fishing at the same time. We probably hadn't had our lines in the water 5 minutes, and our guide said you have to pull them out because if you catch a salmon, then you might end up directing the grizzly bear to our boat and be fighting him for that salmon. So we pulled the lines in, and we were probably within 30 feet of 3 grizzly bears, the mom and her 2 cubs. The mom gets a hold of the salmon, just a big old salmon, has it in her mouth, just mowing on that thing. And one of the cubs decides that they want that salmon and reach up to grab it. The mom swipes her across the head, sends her flying. All 3 bears are roaring at a level that you could not replace or replicate on a sound system. It was one of the most amazing sounds I'd ever heard. Meanwhile, the eagles are soaring, just trying to get the leftover salmon. The humans are lined up to try to get some salmon. It's just an intense thing that you could never experience in the way that you could experience by being there. So to be there is the risk that those grizzlies could have chosen to come after us, which we probably could have got away with. I'm not completely confident that we were 100% safe, but I wouldn't trade the experience right now. And so, but if you decide you want to see that on a video, you would never get the sound, you would never get the emotional experience, you'd never have the life experience that you would have by being there. And so everything you do is going to have some risk, and that's why I was wearing that hat, to remind you that there is risk, but that also with risk there's a return. And so today, hopefully you can kind of ponder that and what risk makes sense for you, and hopefully we can live in a freedom that allows us to choose risk as we go forward in our culture. So I want to talk to you about the idea of how taxes have an impact on your investment returns. Let's see here. I'm going to pull this forward here. I'm going to share this screen with you. Okay, hopefully y'all can see this. Blow it up a little bit here for your viewing pleasure. I want to talk to you about the idea that you want $10,000 to invest And you have 3 ways to invest that $10,000. And again, this is for illustrative purposes only. Consult a tax advisor, because this will not be your experience. There will be changes in tax laws. There will be changes in your income. There'll be all kinds of things that go on. These are just for illustrative purposes to get you to think about the pros and cons of how you might set aside money for the future. So the traditional tax deferred way would be a 401k or an IRA, where you put your money into it and you get a deduction from your taxes by the amount you put in there, and that money is deferred from taxes until you take it out. If you take it out, either this or the tax-free one in a Roth type of account, if you take those out prior to age 59 and a half, you're going to have additional tax consequences that, again, you need to consult with your tax advisor. This is just the assumption that we're going to leave this alone until we're 60, so that there aren't any incremental taxes. We're just using estimated taxes, both for the state and local, to give us an idea of how we might assess this in the future. So the $100,000, you earn that money over some period of time. If you make $10,000 a year, you're going to do that over 10 years. If you earn $100,000 in a year, you're going to do it in a year. So if you put this money in tax deferred, you're going to get a $10,000 deduction from your taxes. That's going to be, instead of $100,000 that's subject to state and local income taxes, you're going to have $90,000. No matter which one of these categories, tax deferred, tax free, or taxable in, if you have that $100,000 of wages, you're going to pay the 7.65% for federal, for Social Security and Medicare taxes, or $7,650. And keep in mind, your employer pays that same amount for you. Not many people pay attention to that and are aware of that, but that is how expensive Social Security is. For that, every $100,000, it's going to be $15,300 that goes to the federal government for Social Security and Medicare. So that's a significant tax that essentially doesn't have any deductions on it. You're going to pay that tax over time, and it's been fairly stable at 7.65% for a long time. The way that they've increased that tax is there's a maximum amount of your income you have to pay that on, and every year that goes up. For the higher income earners, they have to keep paying that 7.65%. So on all 3 of those, you're going to pay that on your $100,000. Then on this one, I calculated your federal income, and I'm using a 15% rate for federal and 5% for state. So you had to pay the 15% of $90,000. That's the 100 minus your tax deferral 10. So that's $13,500 in federal income taxes that you're going to be subject to on that. And then on this state income tax, it's $4,500. And this is an oversimplification of how taxes work, but I'm just giving you this to help you ponder which way you might want to invest in the future. So we're trying to get $10,000 set aside for investing, which way it makes the most sense for your situation. So once you've made that $10,000 deposit, you've got $64,350 after taxes available for other uses in life. If we go to the tax-free, that's known often as the Roth IRA or the Roth 401k. Have the same $100,000, you're not taking the $10,000 deduction. You're paying your federal Social Security and Medicare taxes here, paying federal taxes at 15% of $100,000 is $15,000, and $5,000 for state income taxes. That gives you $72,350, and then you take your $10,000 out of there to put into your Roth, and you end up with, after all those same expenses, $62,350. That's kind of trying to give you an apples to apples comparison. And then if you decide, I don't want to put any of this money in a tax deferred account of any sort, or a tax-free account that requires me to get to it after age 59 and a half, I want to have access to this all the time. You're going to have the same initial math as you would have with the Roth account here. You're going to end up with the $62,350. This is an oversimplification of how the tax system works. I'm just trying to give you an idea for illustrative purposes. So don't use this as your own calculation. You can sit down with your tax professional and figure out which one of these ways makes the most sense for you. Keep in mind, when I get to explaining some of the compounding, you have an extra $2,000 here that is compounding outside of the $10,000 that you wouldn't have for either one of these two. So when we get to that next one is how does the compounding work? Let me stop sharing here real quick. Okay, good sorts there. So when we get back to how the compounding works, we are, again, this is for illustrative purposes only. Consult a tax advisor. It's not going to work exactly like this, but on all three accounts, we started with $10,000. The $10,000, I'm assuming we're going to earn 8%. And again, you cannot get an 8% rate of return in a guaranteed manner, but we had to use something to give you a similar comparison on these. So we used 8% less any immediate taxes that are due on that money. So on this tax deferred account, which would be a traditional type IRA or Roth or 401k account, your $10,000 would earn $800. Same thing would be on the tax-free Roth accounts. Your $10,000 would earn 8% or $800, wouldn't be subject to income taxes immediately on either of these because they're deferred from taxes. The taxable account, you'd earn the 800, but again, if you were at the 15% federal and 5% state, that's 20% in taxes, or 20% of 800 is 160, and you would only net out, if you realize those gains, $640 to add to your principal. So at the beginning of year two, the tax advantage accounts would have 10,800 in them, and the taxable account would have 10,640. So what you've got here is a smaller amount earning interest than if you had it on these other two over here. So then you have the same math that continues. The interest on the 10,800 is 864 versus 681 on the 10,640. And you just keep doing that all the way for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, you end up with 14,693 in the tax deferred account, 14,693 in the tax-free account, 13,637 in the taxable account. Okay, that's what you have before taxes. But keep in mind, tax deferred means you're not paying the taxes now, you're paying in the future. And so all $14,693, you've not paid a dime in taxes on that. And that's deferred until you take that money out after 59.5. If you take it out prior to 59.5, you're going to pay incremental taxes on that. But we're just assuming you're not going to pull this out before 59.5. And if we use that 20% tax rate, your 14,693, if you took it all out at once, you would have $11,755 available to you. If you took your Roth IRA or Roth 401k all out at once after age 59.5, you'd have $14,693. And your taxable account, you've paid the taxes along the way and you've got more money there. Again, this is not a solution for every particular situation. It's just to give you an idea of how taxes work over time. If you can defer money often, it's going to work out better for you. But the things you can't control that are important to know is you can't control how the government's going to change the tax rates. You can't control how your rate of return is going to compound over time. And so those things are unknown. And so there's not a particular answer to what is the best solution for you. However, if the rules stay the same, a tax-free option probably is a good place to start, particularly if you're a young investor and want to kind of simplify your life. You're not going to pay the taxes or have to do tax filings on those efforts as you go along the way. So that's just a thought of how you can invest your money. It's not any specific investment. It's a place where you put those money. If you could envision all three options as three different tables, you've got a tax-free table, a tax-deferred table, and a taxable table. There's pros and cons to having money on each one of those tables. You can invest the money on each of those three tables very similarly. There's going to be more restrictions on your retirement type accounts depending on who's holding that money for you. Sometimes they're not going to let you invest as aggressively as you could in a individual account that's taxable as you go. So those are sorts of things you'll want to figure out as you look to the future and figure out how you want to curiously invest your money. But I'd encourage you to think through that, talk with your tax professional, talk with your investment professional, and then you can begin to have success as you move forward. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you all soon.